It's been a long time. I'm gonna stop. It's been a long time. Yeah, come on. Take this from me. Yeah. Hey, yo, it's my life, my time, my rights, my rhymes, my grind, my struggle, hustle, sweat in my blood too. A predator smells fear, and I smell a lot. My competitors fled scared, cause they smelled I was hot. I want it all. Excess, the sex, much success, stress sucks. I want it all, no less. So come on.
What up, it's your boy T-Man Reaction. Today's Wrestling Wednesday. About to get some wrestling energy. We talk about different eras of wrestling. Though as well too. No, yes, I know. I skipped the superstar era, the golden era. I will go back to. I'm probably gonna do that last, but I want to get to the eras that I was fully gung ho with, mostly as well too. Though, so I guess I finished with the new generation era, which is the era I fully got started watching wrestling as a kid as well too, though. Like the superstar I saw watch here and there because I happened to be on because my brother watched it or cousin or somebody watched it as well too. But the new generation one, I felt majority of it I got into it more as well too. The Attitude Eras was one as well too, and to a break here and there, but I got into it. It was lovely. But this is while the Attitude Era was the boom era as well too. This next era right here could be argue between that and the Attitude Era as one of the best era ever, and that is none other than the Ruthless Aggression Era. Was part of it is led by 4 of the OVW. First off, shout out to them, one member of the OVW of the class, John Cena, winning that IC title, taking away from that dirty bastard, Dominic Mysterio. Yeah, that's a common bastard because what he said to the Ray on the last Raw. Yeah. Told him to keep his name, father name was not talking about Eddie. Yeah, he a bastard for that. Anyway, but yeah, led by John, the four class, the what considered one of the best class out of a developmental territory, right there. OVW, which consists of John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, and Batista, along with a few others came from it, such as Shelton Benjamin, Victoria, Beth Phoenix, and many others as well too. Though, so we got a lot. There's a lot of people who had a cool run as either tag team mid-carders and champions in the Attitude Era. If they blow up in the Ruthless Aggression Era, such as Edge, Eddie Guerrero, Jeff Hardy, the Kane, and many others. Though one too, and there were some moves some dreaded moves that was good to folks, but it was dreaded some, like the infamous Reign of Terror from Triple H as well too, and many others things as well too. And around that time we lost some members of some folks in wrestling as well too, though, such as Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. I think Umaga passed around the time as well too. But anyway, Umaga was another boom period as well too. I think no, it's Pete. That'll be the next era for PG for CM Punk. But I feel like a lot went down in the Ruthless Aggression Era though. So we'll check this out though. This is wrestling with Andy, the entire history of the Ruthless Aggression Era. Let's get it. And also, not to mention SmackDown being one of the best show ever, as it was not only backed by the right ends of booking and Paul Heyman, but the commentary who was second to King and JR. That's none of them, Michael Cole and Taz, and the infamous SmackDown 6 as well too. So anyway, without further ado, let's get it.
There have been a lot of eras in WWE's history.
And that's just part of it. I know it's going to be more spoken by Andy as well too, because he dropped some knowledge that I probably missed as well too, or did not know.
And of those eras, the two most celebrated are probably the Golden Era and the Attitude Era. But there's another hidden gem in there, one which to some fans is even better than those periods.
Mm-hmm.
What is that hidden gem? Well, it's the time which came along during the 2000s, known simply as the Ruthless Aggression Era. But just what made it so special? Well, that's
Oh yeah! Can we not forget about the resurgence of somebody from that witness that was slightly part of the Superstar era, the main part of the New Generation era, and had a pivotal part of the Attitude era. The research of the one and only Heartbreak Kid himself. If I get to it, Shawn Michaels. Yes, can we not forget about that though? Let's get going.
Made it so special. Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now. It all started in 2001, sort of.
And speaking of that dirty MF, Dom, this is where the story of the whole thing between him, Ray and Eddie, along with Dom, started in the Ruthless Aggression era too, though. Oh right, hey, yeah, let's keep going.
Then that after the Attitude Era came to a dramatic and abrupt end in the spring of this year when Stone Cold Steve Austin turned heel at WrestleMania 17, WWF were left scrambling to try and keep momentum going. Unfortunately, though, their first attempt at doing that would prove to be a monumental flop, as despite the idea of WWF versus WCW feeling like an easy home run hit, it was mishandled to the point that it's since gone down in infamy. So after that...
Half because of darn Tom Warner can bring all the big stars around too. They sell for their scraps in semi big stars like Booker T and DDP, but how this booking is crazy. And not to mention it being like they had to de facto a lot of their own to be part of it, like Stone Cold Steve Austin and them, just to make it interesting. But it didn't do much as well either. So yeah, man, it was a hit and miss, but we're more miss than hit with the Invasion angle.
That angle came to an end, and Vince McMahon realized he was going to need to take things in a new direction if he wanted to stop the bleeding when it came to fans tuning out in droves. He decided upon something in the summer of 2002. What would that new direction be? Well, it would be summed up with two words:
ruthless aggression.
Those were the words the boss spoke to the roster as he stood in the middle of the ring on the July 24th episode of Raw, surrounded by everyone on the...
Following the exit of... And that's all we witnessed. This is why we witnessed the exit of two of our favorites of the Attitude Era, such as Stone Cold Steve Austin and Rock, who came back sporadically as well too. Though Stone Cold would be in the GM and has last match with Rock, and Rock came back as Hollywood Rock as well too. So yeah.
On the Red Brand, who he was looking to motivate. And the reason it was only the Red Brand who were there was because, by this point, the brand split had taken place, and both Raw and SmackDown had been divided into two distinct groups of performers, with the former being led by Ric Flair, and then later, former WCW boss Eric Bischoff, and the latter being led by Vince McMahon himself, and then later his daughter Stephanie.
Definitely one of the best. My favorite was Stephanie, because one, she was actually a somewhat face GM, and her little feud with Sable. I loved it as well. This was a rare time I was rooting for Stephanie as well too. So yeah, she did her thing.
Obviously,
and
then
not to mention she was looking so lovely as well too. This is when she just got her little implants as well too, little augmentation. But yeah, she looked so lovely.
Joe would be competing with each other in order to try and best represent Vince McMahon's new vision going forward. The only problem was, during those early days at least, it wasn't fully clear what ruthless aggression was supposed to be. What separated the killer instinct the boss wanted his roster to show here from the same killer instinct that they'd been showing during the Attitude Era? That was something everyone had to figure out. And one of the first people to make a real attempt at this would be John Cena, someone who made his SmackDown debut not long after to challenge Kurt Angle during the Olympic Heroes Weekly Open Challenge gimmick he was doing at the time. Obviously, then, this would prove to be a key moment in retrospect because, well, Cena would lose this match, and while he would still be an up-and-comer for a while yet, over time he would end up becoming the face of this era in many ways. For the time being, however, the big names of WWF, or WWE as it had now been rebranded following a lawsuit the World Wildlife Fund had successfully filed against the company for improper usage of the initials, would continue to be the same big names of the Attitude Era. That said, this would start to change when, at WrestleMania 19, Steve Austin would quietly retire from the ring. Clearly then, this represented a huge changing of the guards. And with it being combined with the fact that The Rock already had one foot out the door here too as he set about going to dominate Hollywood, it meant some new big names were going to have to rise to the top. Enter Brock Lesnar, the first of the famous OVW class of 2002 who would fully rise to the forefront in WWE, as after making a huge splash on Raw after
Woo!
WrestleMania 18,
I remember he came out though, destroying
risen to the
everybody.
top in record time to the point that he'd won the undisputed title at SummerSlam later that year, and had then gone on to main event WrestleMania 19.
Yeah, oh, he
against
missed
Kurt
that
Angle.
too.
Unfortunately for Vince McMahon, however, while Brock may have seemed like the answer to all his problems, as not only was he a physical specimen unlike any other, but he could also go in the ring to a high level, the Beast's time in WWE would ultimately prove to be short-lived. Why was that? Well, because by the time WrestleMania 20 came around, Lesnar would have already grown tired of the brutal WWE road schedule, with this being a major contributing factor in him deciding to exit stage right here and instead eventually move on to a career in UFC, where he became an even
First he tried in the NFL.
bigger star. And once Vince McMahon realized Brock was not going to be his new Steve Austin, he had to quickly change direction and figure out who else he was going to push in that spot. Who would he go with here? Well, on the Raw side of the equation, there was already one big name who had clearly set himself apart, and that would be the boss's own son-in-law, Triple H. Yes, despite breaking out as a main event act during the Attitude Era, the game had always spent that time living in the shadow of both Steve Austin and The Rock. Hell, you could argue he was also in the shadow of people like Mick Foley and The Undertaker.
True, it's true.
Once 3 out of 4 of those people were gone, however, the future creative head of WWE would be able to settle into a role as the top dog on the Raw brand. Unfortunately, though, this would not be a period which was well received by fans, so much so that it would go on to become known as the Reign of Terror. Why was this? Well, for a near 3-year period, the game would do everything he could to turn himself into Harley Race, more often than not at the expense of everyone around him. That's right, there were a lot of people who could have been elevated to the level of superstardom here. Most of them.
Especially this one. Ooh. Sadly, this is why a lot of people call him Triple K because of this. And they still feel like that he's still Triple K, but still. This one, and the RVD was definitely one, but this one pissed me off. But the one that really pissed me off, you'll see.
Come in from WCW or ECW following the fall of those two promotions, but in the end, none of them would be able to excel as well as they should have, as Triple H would always be standing tall over them by the time their feud was over. We're talking about names like Scott Steiner, Rob Van Dam, Bill Goldberg, and perhaps most infamously, Booker T.
Definitely.
Every one of them was damaged by
ain't just dumb. It's some people within their own. I hope they talk about it too.
Of terror. And that was only the tip of the iceberg in many ways when it came to this period's woes, at least as far as the Red brand was concerned. Yes, there were also some pretty healthy storylines going on.
Oh, yes. This one here. And this, and you know what pisses you off? I told you. That's my favorite version of Kane. Kane was a personality. This could have been a hit right here. He could have had a title win right there. And they had to keep going with the Reign of Terror, but also he had to unmask him. And then he had the unmasking. Oh man, damn you, Triple H. The hatred I have for Triple H at the time as well too. Somewhat respect the movement we did in NXT, and somewhat respect we did in the main roster. I'm so right now with the booking as a lady, but I feel like it's more TKO than Triple H. But some people say it's still Triple H. Who knows? Anyway, let's keep going.
Which were largely trying and failing to recapture the Crash TV feeling of the Attitude Era.
Yup.
And each of them only added to the sense that Raw was stuck in the
and speaking of Kane, we even this till this day the most conflicted dilemma of wrestling for me right here. Demos. Oh my god. Because they really tried their hardest to make this man the babyface out of that whole, to come out as the babyface out of that whole thing. The babyface out of the whole thing, debacle. They was like, they, oh my god, I'm still irked to this day how they really try to have us root for Kane after over this just because of what Snitsky did and anything as well too. I didn't want to have no being. I was watching, but really didn't have anything to do with. I don't think I root for anybody. I just watched. Didn't root for nobody because this is bullshit. For me, I was rooting for Lita until she turned heel. Then like, fuck this. I'm dead ass. Like it's the most conflicted dilemma right here. Out of all the dilemmas, this is the most conflicting one.
and needed something which was going to shake it up. That said, it wasn't like there wasn't good stuff to be found on the Red brand here, as Triple H did give us Evolution, a modern-day Four Horsemen stable which would be made up of him, Ric Flair, and the other two notable names from that famous OVW class of 2002 not named Brock Lesnar and John Cena, with those being Randy Orton and Dave Batista. Then, of course, there was the rise of people like Chris Jericho,
another one had to break out.
Finally made it to the main event level.
Yeah, that's right. Another one that had to break out in the and that was like mainly a mid-Carter in the mid-Carter champion, whatever, in the Ruthless Aggression era.
In the early days of the Ruthless Aggression era, after years of being undervalued. And as if that wasn't enough, it would also be here that the women first started being taken seriously. When the likes of Trish Stratus, Lita, Molly Holly, Victoria, and more rose to the forefront. Sure, we'd still be a long way off from the women's revolution, which would come later, and there would still be plenty of bad that the ladies had to put up with during the early 2000s. But the fact that they were allowed to have competitive wrestling matches at all was a sign of progress being made in the right direction. Really, though, the general consensus among fans at this time was that, while Raw certainly had its highlights, the good show to watch if you were a wrestling fan was SmackDown. Why was that? Well, this was the era of the SmackDown 6. That's right. Once Paul Heyman took the creative reins of the Blue brand, he'd start focusing the show much more on in-ring action, with the key sextet of performers he used to promote this style being Kurt Angle, Edge, Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and Chavo Guerrero. Take any of these performers in any combination back in the early 2000s, and you were bound to get a banger. And they weren't the only things making SmackDown the A show of the people here. Now, aside from that, you had Brock Lesnar, someone who hadn't yet made his exit here, on top of the card and putting on some truly dominating performances at every turn against the likes of Olympic gold medalists. Of course, once Brock did leave in 2004 then, it left a gap in the main event scene, one which, for a while at least, was filled by Eddie Guerrero following his iconic WWE title win at No Way Out that February. One of the most feel-good moments in wrestling history.
Now, if this is the way they will have that dirty little MF Dom go face by having a world title win, if they want to have a world title win, have him this way, not still his dirty gimmick, at least his semi-dirty gimmick, like with Eddie, face like she still, not this still heel shit for real.
In the long term, however, it was never going to be Eddie Guerrero who was going to be in charge for the Ruthless Aggression era, just as it was never going to be Chris Benoit who did this once he was moved over to Raw for a while. No, despite both of these men ending WrestleMania 20 by celebrating in the ring with their newly won WWE and World Heavyweight titles, by that summer, each would be getting pushed back down the card as new champs took their place in the form of JBL and Triple H once more. Thankfully, though, this time these runs on top would only be transitional ones from the heels, ones designed to set up the true crowning of the next generation, a crowning which would finally happen at WrestleMania 21 in the spring of 2005. Who would be the new faces of this generation who were crowned at that show? Well, it would be two of the three remaining members of that OVW class of 2002, John Cena and Dave Batista. Yes, after spending the better part of a year rising up the card as United States champion, it would be at the 21st annual Showcase of the Immortals that Big Match John became the ace of SmackDown when he beat JBL for the WWE title. And meanwhile, as that was happening, Big Dave would be closing out the hottest angle the company had put on in years when, after splitting from Evolution and subsequently turning babyface, he managed to relieve Triple H's World Heavyweight title
one of the best babyface run of all time.
And the reign of terror in the process. What was happening with Randy Orton, the other member of that 2002 class while this was
his moments.
Well, he would reach superstardom too. In fact, he was the first of the three to become world champion when he beat Chris Benoit at SummerSlam the year prior for the honor, with that making him the youngest world champion in WWE history, a record he holds to this day. Ultimately, though, his title run would be cut short and he'd be de-pushed for a little while, with this partially being a result of the notorious attitude problems he was having behind the scenes back then. That's right, similar to how 90s Shawn Michaels was almost impossible to work with, young Randy Orton also proved to be a major headache for those around him. And that led to him falling into the spot of being a solid third place behind Cena and Batista for a while. Not that he was getting nothing to work with at this point, of course. Though at WrestleMania 21, he'd have a classic with The Undertaker, one which pretty much set the template for the streak bouts which were to come in the decade following. And speaking of Shawn Michaels,
Yes,
he'll also be having
here we
quite
go.
a time here, as following his return to the ring in 2002 after
Yes.
suffering what was at the time believed to be a career-ending back injury, he'd once more be a focal point
Yes.
of the Raw brand in his own right. That said, HBK was very much in the role of semi-legend here, not someone who the entire show was being built around anymore. No, that spot remained Dave Bautista's and John Cena's for the Raw and SmackDown brands respectively, but things were about to change even with this dynamic, as during the 2005 WWE Draft, each man would be moved to the opposite show, with them taking the respective title belts with them. Why was this being done? Well, despite SmackDown still arguably being the better show in 2005, Raw remained the flagship, the one which got the highest viewership on account of it having the most cash with casual fans. So when Vince McMahon decided that they were going to go with John Cena as their true ace over Batista, they made the decision to move him and his WWE title over to the main show. Still, even if this was a loss for SmackDown, they did get a strong replacement in Big Dave during the trade.
They did.
And they also continued to have the ultimate legend in the company back then, The Undertaker, someone who had become synonymous with the Blue brand by that point. And as if that wasn't enough, they also had the company's cruiserweight division.
Yes, right there. There's something that wasn't heavily showcasing during WWE at all. It was like very very see you see on the the B shows, the C shows, and all that as well too. They did have like a light heavyweight champion, but not as heavy as well with WCW. And when they bought WCW, they brought what it was known as their most talked about division of all time. The cruiserweight division came to WWE, main on SmackDown, and the rest was history.
With this meaning, they were able to feature the high-flying antics of performers such as Billy Kidman, Paul London, and Brian Kendrick on a regular basis. And they'd also eventually have Edge as an exclusive too, another huge star who'd risen up the ranks during the mid-2000s and turned himself into a bona fide main event act after turning heel and winning the inaugural Money in the Bank contract. Hell, so high would the Rated R superstar rise here, he'd at one point feel like the main rival to John Cena, especially when he was beating him for the world title. That said, for as much as Edge would go on to become a key player for SmackDown during the latter half of the Ruthless Aggression era, the first part of it would see him be featured as a Raw act, as, with Lita by his side, he was booed out of every arena he entered.
Oh, yes.
And that gave us one of the more memorable angles of the mid-2000s when he started an on-screen rivalry with Matt Hardy, one which blurred the lines of reality and fiction, as it was built upon the fact that Edge and Lita had been having a real-life affair behind.
Yeah, that was crazy right there. That was like the first we had that. I think the only two ones they had like blur light, that was this. The only one I think of, the other one I think of was with Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett with his wife, because that was a whole mess too. And they missed some other ones too, but that was the main ones I remember though. This and the Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett was in TNA, but still, wow, they blew the line. They blurred the line with that one like crazy.
Version one's back. Of course, as scandals go, however, this was nothing compared to what would happen in November of 2005.
Oh, yeah.
As that was when, to the shock of everyone in the industry, Eddie Guerrero passed away suddenly. What had happened to him? Well, after years of steroid abuse had taken a huge toll on him and enlarged his heart to a dangerous size, it finally gave out, and he was found by his nephew Chavo on the floor of his hotel room. So as you would expect then, this, combined with all the other cases of wrestlers in their 30s and 40s who were passing away for similar reasons at that point in time, led to WWE instituting a new wellness policy, one which would help them take care of the health of performers on the roster.
And crazy thing by Eddie was off of, if you didn't mean to know, Eddie was off of WWE for one point because of felt in the way as well too. That's why he had a break from there. He came back. He was actually during that break he was on Ring of Honor, but still. That's crazy that happened. And then, I think I'll talk about what else happened.
All while avoiding some of the bad PR which was now coming their way. Still though, even if this would help to get the substance abuse issues in the locker room under control somewhat, it wouldn't fix the Eddie-sized hole which was now left in fans' hearts. No, the only thing which came close to doing this was when, in honor of his fallen friend, Rey Mysterio won the 2006 Royal Rumble, and then went on to WrestleMania 22 where he beat both Kurt Angle and Randy Orton in a triple threat match to become the new World Heavyweight Champion. What was happening over on Raw while this story was dominating SmackDown? Well, aside from John Cena's continued run as the ace...
Hold on a second, got a call. I'm back. Let's keep going. Just got a good call. Hopefully it's some good news down the line. But let's keep going.
of the brand, the big story would be the reunion of D Generation
Yes!
under its original 2 members.
Oh, yes. In my opinion, this is low-key if one of the best, if not possibly the second best version of DX right here. Oh, yes. This was the best because, for one, DX, because this is when the rare time because this is the time you get DX, like, directly be against authority, not just like against not against Hills and the corporation and all of that, what they were as well too. They literally directly against authority as well too. They aim was at Vince McMahon. This is why this possibly could be one of the best versions of them as well too. And then they're older, they was really directly against Vince McMahon as well too. Because the first one was just like they was like heels or tweeners, but it was like his authority, but mainly was against like Charlotte Slaughter and all of that, and anybody that was all about the good deeds, like the Hart Foundation, stuff like that. And then another one, they was just wild and crazy bunch who was against the Nation Domination, and they was just against like any Hills at the time. They just wild and crazy, and trying to take over WCW. That was a cool moment too. That's probably, since the first face was probably considered the best one, but this gotta be considered at least the tied best or second best version of DX right here, for real. Because they was literally against their authority and everything, and they gave no fucks. They has fun with it too, and the crowd loved it.
Michaels and Triple H. That said, this would be a very different DX to the one which existed in the 90s, as by then both men were older, and in the case of HBK, he'd found God and become a born-again Christian,
true.
Meaning the same risque antics they'd gotten up to.
Just true, that's the other thing, but it worked. It worked. They still found a way to make it work. Know what I mean? He wasn't like, it's like salt and pepper, salt being about God or anything, but not like too, but still like show some edge to her.
During the 90s, just wouldn't fly anymore. As you'd expect then, for some fans who remembered the pair for that initial run, this all felt like a bit of a watered-down retread, a pale imitation of what had come before. But for kids who missed out on the Attitude Era and who were seeing DX for the first time here, it was all still fresh and was entertaining enough to get them tuning in every week as the pair went to war with the McMahon family and their hand-picked roster of minions like the Spirit Squad. And again, it wasn't like DX were being asked to carry the show in 2006. No, by that point, even Triple H had taken a step back from feeling the need to be the focus of Raw every Monday night, as instead, the new generation were fully in control at the top, with the main 4 of these now being John Cena, Batista, Randy Orton, and Edge. Yes, WWE had managed to finally solidify a new generation of stars to take over the old ones and make the Ruthless Aggression era feel like something distinct.
And it's crazy that you think about Edge being part of the Ruthless Aggression, the All-Out era, and it being the forefront of the 4th spot since, Brock left early as well, too, with Orton and Edge being the heels and Cena and Batista being the baby faces. Now, ironically and coincidentally, Orton and Edge become a tag team as well, too.
From times prior. And that meant it now no longer came across as a company all about the Crash TV stylings of the Attitude Era for the most part, or the cartoon theatrics of the Golden Era for that matter, even if Big Match John felt like a very Hulk Hogan-coded act. But there were still some problems deeply rooted into the direction Vince McMahon's promotion was going in here. The biggest of which was probably the overall fan response to John Cena.
Yeah.
You see, Big Match John had gotten very over with fans during his early run as the Doctor of Thugonomics, cocky, streetwise rapping heel who'd eventually have to turn babyface as a result of audience demand. Once he won the WWE title at WrestleMania 21 and was formally coronated as the face of the company, Vince McMahon felt the character wasn't child-friendly enough. So at this point, Cena would be rebranded as the hustle, loyalty, and respect-preaching super babyface most people know him as being today, a change which was indeed a hit with young kids, but which was not well-received by adult
that sucks.
No, for the generation who
that sucks. Was like that as well too, man.
Remembered the days of Steve Austin and his rebellious antics being on top, this felt like a step backwards for the company. And that section of the fan base would let their feelings be known on a regular basis as, from about mid-2005 onward, John Cena would get mixed reactions at best and would be wildly booed out of buildings at worst. It didn't matter who WWE threw up against him in order to try and get fan sentiment back on the champ's side. No one could change their feelings toward the West Missouri native. Not Triple H, not Chris Jericho, not even Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
And that would never be more obvious than at One Night Stand 2006,
Woo.
the second edition of an ECW revival which had started the year prior. Why was that? Well, it was at this show that in the main event, Big Match John received one of the most vicious crowd rejections of all time, with it being here that the iconic "If Cena wins, we riot" fan sign originated. Of course, given this was an ECW crowd, it was always going to be more than a little bit extra in favor of Rob Van Dam, the man who ended up dethroning the champ that night. After all, Paul Heyman's renegade group of misfits had always stood in opposition to WWE. So that's why it was ultimately so disappointing for so many fans when, after One Night Stand 2, Vince McMahon decided to revive the old brand that he now owned the rights to as a weekly show, one which would soon become known as WWECW. Why would it become known as this? Well, it quickly became apparent that this was not going to be a show which maintained the same spirit
Young Bobby Lashley
or brand had back in the day over in Philly. No, what WWE put out here very much felt like a parody of ECW in many ways, a parody which would ultimately act more like a developmental league for the promotion, not too dissimilar to what NXT would later become. Sure, Vince McMahon would try to give some legitimacy to the whole thing at points, but any attempts to do this would only backfire, as not only would Rob Van Dam's world title reign end up getting cut short when he was busted for smoking weed during a car ride with Sabu, but additions to the Extreme brand like Kurt Angle would exit stage right before 2007 arrived. That's right. It was in 2006 that the Olympic hero left WWE after his own substance abuse issues got...
Damn, that's crazy. And this is like the best version of Kurt Angle too. He was like more of a tweener amount of time when he did the wrestling machine. Well, he's a face. It started as a heel at first. This is right. I think it's after Batista hurt himself and the big goal was on the line, and he went as a heel and then won and it became a face right after as well too. And then he had an infamous. He turned the infamous "you suck" towards instead of the crowd, but instead of the crowd towards him or towards his opponent. Like he said, "You better not messed up because against me, you'll suck." And then when the crowd say you suck, he posts out the opponents we come out too. That was an awesome moment. And then of course he had the mouthpiece and everything, and rock the sneakers. Oh yeah.
So bad that WWE felt like they could no longer keep him on their books. Obviously then, this marked a turning point in the Ruthless Aggression era, as it meant another one of its most notable names was no longer there, and what's more, it meant Angle would never get to have his planned WrestleMania match against The Undertaker. What a shame that was then, as by this point, the Dead Man was about to start a string of classics at the Showcase of the Immortal, which would create a streak within a streak of sorts, with the first of these happening at WrestleMania 23 during his one-on-one bout with Batista. And that wasn't the only big thing starting for WWE in 2007, as this would also be the year that CM Punk up the card. No, he wouldn't yet be anywhere.
Not yet. That's next era.
In 2011 with his famous pipe bomb promo. But across 2007 and 2008, the Second City Saint would begin his ascent by doing things like winning the Money in the Bank contract, becoming World Heavyweight Champion, and having a very memorable feud with Jeff Hardy. And while he was doing this, over in the women's division, things were continuing to get stronger as the likes of Mickie James were now entering the fray, with it being her who had probably the best women's program of the era against Trish Stratus here. Unfortunately, though, this period would also mark one of the biggest scandals in wrestling history, and the event which in many ways brought the Ruthless Aggression era to an end, as it was in June of 2007 that the infamous Chris Benoit incident happened. Yes, we all know the gory details of this one by now, so we won't go into it too much here.
Yeah, don't.
But suffice it to say, when the story broke and it became major worldwide news, it shone a very negative light on WWE. So just as they had instituted the wellness policy following the passing of Eddie Guerrero in 2005, WWE would now implement a ban on things like chair shots to the head going forward, all while they were also putting stricter restrictions on wrestlers returning to the ring after they'd suffered a concussion. As for how they would handle Benoit himself, well, Vince McMahon would understandably choose to never mention the Canadian's name on television again,
at all,
with him being effectively erased from the company's history here, as WWE once more tried to clean up its image in order to quell the public backlash. And that would all lead to 2008, the year that the Ruthless Aggression era officially came to an end. That's right. While other eras often have a more vague endpoint, we can actually pinpoint the exact moment this period came to a close, as it would be on July 22nd, 2008, that the company formally went PG. Why had they gone PG here? Well, as you would expect, a major factor was the Chris Benoit situation, as WWE still wanted to distance themselves from that incident as much as they could here, with the best way of doing this being to move the entire direction of the company in a more child-friendly direction. But it wasn't the only reason. No, there was also the fact that new sponsors, such as Mattel being brought on board, meant Vince McMahon simply wasn't going to be able to get away with some of the more salacious elements of his product he'd enjoyed putting out there prior to that. Obviously then, this meant the last pay-per-view which the era would give us would be July 2008's The Great American Bash. A pretty good way to go out as it happened, because it was the show which gave us an excellent Chris Jericho-Shawn Michaels bout, one of the highlights of their great feud that year in fact. And on top of that, it would also highlight so many of the names which had made the 2000s so special for WWE, as performers like John Cena, Batista, Edge, and Triple H were all given prominent spots on the card. Hell, it would even be the last time that Vince McMahon would officially sanction the use of blood on one of his shows, with this not happening again until the TKO era over a decade later. Yes, for as much as it never achieved the same level of mainstream success that either the Golden Era or the Attitude Era did, the Ruthless Aggression Era was quietly one of the best the company ever produced.
Definitely as well too. Definitely one of the best as well too. Going to be considered, but some people, like I say, a lot of people didn't grow up the superstar as much heavy. Like I didn't follow as heavy. I started following a new generation era, but my boom period was the Attitude. But this as well too, and a lot of people I'm friends with, like my good friend Beeb the Man, this is his start point of wrestling as well too though. So it still could be considered arguably one of the best of those as well too though, between that and the Attitude Era and the Golden Era as well too though. Cause especially since this was like more, I feel like people will put this over the Attitude Era time, as this was more wrestle based than the Crash TV, like he called it, Crash TV space of the Attitude Era as well too. So yeah, other than that though, cool video from Wrestling with Andy as always. If you like my reaction, like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's your boy T-Bird signing off. One love.